Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am Nick Scheist, and you may remember me from the Scheist Podcast and Bad Movies We Love.
And I'm Seth Vargas of the Movie Friends Podcast.
And we decided to join forces, a team-up, if you will, because X-Men 97 was so good, we just couldn't help ourselves.
That's right. So join us as we discuss our personal history with the comics, the films, and the collectible trading cards of the X-Men universe.
And, of course, the catalyst for it all, X-Men 97. To me, my ex-friends.
No.
Seth, what's up, bud?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Had to, reprocess all the trauma from these 3 episodes that we just rewatched for the purpose of this show. It's some heavy hitting stuff. Yeah, we start with episode 7 is Bright Eyes, and then we start with Gambit's funeral.
Yeah, and Nightcrawler performing the service.
Yeah, exactly. We just talked about Nightcrawler in the previous episode about how he's a devout man of faith and how that folds into sort of like his character archetype. And I remember in our last discussion, we talked a little bit about this, like the identity of this being a kid show. And I think, some of that comes from the idea that the original series was a kid show. And I mean, do you still feel like this is a show for kids now that you're watching it sort of with a fine tooth comb?
I do. And mainly because I've watched it all the times that I've watched it with my 2 kids who are 11 and 3, and they both love it. They're enthralled by it.
All right. Well, that's good.
I don't think that the content ever dips into, I won't say ever, but I don't think that the content lives in a zone that we would call inappropriate. It just lives in a zone that's like intense. But I am a big believer in intense media for children. Not all of the time. It's fine to have goofy, silly, funny stuff. You need to have the Flintstones and the Jetsons, but it's also okay to have like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn and things that teach you about, morals and intense situations and death,
Yeah, absolutely. And since you've been watching it with your kids, like how did they respond to Gambit's death? I don't think we mentioned that last time. I mean, we obviously talked about that episode and him dying and it being impactful and me getting emotional. But how did your kids handle that?
I think they were just like, whoa. Yeah, I don't think they're processing it the same way. I don't think, throughout this, we didn't have any moments where they were like scared or crying, or they just think it's a great show.
I mean, they're not wrong, but
yeah,
we're sort of like in a phase where like a lot of nostalgia is sweeping through media, whether that be, the Jurassic World series, Ghostbusters, all of these different IPs that already existed that were successful in the late 80s to early 90s. I mean, Star Wars is another one that's sort of like rebooted in that same vein, where it is a difficult balancing act to go back to a property that was beloved by kids of a certain generation and then try to bring that back and make it palatable for those of us that are now adults that I think are still a big part of the core audience. Like when making this show and having the idea to bring it back, I have to imagine that a big part of the discussion was that the fans of the original show are now in their 30s and 40s and want something like this. Or in order to make it palatable to them, we have to make sure that we don't pull our punches and make this explicitly a kid show.
Absolutely. And I don't really have a problem with that. Whenever there's a sequel or reboot, going either way is fine. If they had remade X-Men 97 and it was geared towards kids because they were like, we want kids to be able to watch this, that's fine. But when something kind of grows up with its audience, that's also fine. You should be free to do whatever you want. But yeah, there's no way they were banking on this being a children's show. I don't think so at all. I think that they made it in a way in which children could access it for sure. But this is, no.
Well, yeah, I mean it as a compliment in the sense that a lot of things that seem to bank on nostalgia typically want to be like just good enough to get the parents to get their butts in seats in the theater. Right. And then really it's geared towards the kids. And it's like, okay, there's just enough for the people that watched it 30 years ago to now be wanting to raise their kids on it. But it's not necessarily made for that 30 to 40-year-old consumer, like looking forward. Where I feel like this is actually geared at the core audience that grew up watching the cartoon, but still wants to be accessible for the people that now have kids. So it's like it doesn't get ever like super overly violent or bloody. It's not overly sexual. Like those things are kind of taken away from the identity of the show, but it does deal with heavy subjects like death, like infidelity, like the many, many violations that occur in this show, including this episode. And the violence is a lot, but not in a way that is terrifying or gratuitous. You know, it feels appropriate when it happens because of the structure of the world that they've put us in.
Yes, I was just I was just gonna say again, like to bring it back to the Flintstones. Yes, if randomly in an episode Barney Rubble got stabbed and then exploded himself, that would be very, very odd. But this is a world of violence and action, and so it doesn't feel like, oh my goodness, can you believe what they did on this episode of X-Men? Someone got hurt. It's like, well, when you're playing with exploding fireworks and adamantium claws. And I have a question later about those claws, but I think I'll save it. It also involves Nightcrawler, but yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, I have a question for you, but I think it's more appropriate for the final episode that we're going to record together. So I'm going to save that for later.
Okay.
But yeah, so this episode is like very focused on the wake of Gambit's death and finding Bolivar Trask. And we get to see the X-Men mourning, of course, because they all just lost their friend. We see the frustration sort of spill out of Jubilee and having a tough time grappling with the fact that like they had to lose somebody when for the majority of the previous series and this series, like there was peril and there was danger, but they didn't quite run into a situation where they lost a core member of the team. And this, expressly impacts Rogue, of course, because she's dealing with a lot of guilt for the way that their relationship sort of didn't find closure because of her decision with Magneto. And I love Angry Rogue, and watching her go ballistic is a ton of fun, actually.
I agree. Yeah. I was into all of her powers being utilized for not quite evil, but rogue going rogue.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't see that a lot from her.
It's a bit of an evil Superman type thing. It's great.
Yeah, because there's like in the previous show, and if you read the comics, it's like, you know, that Rogue is strong, you know, that she can fly, you know, that she can siphon other people's powers or memories or just physical health, depending on the person that she's touching. But it's rare to see her like at her full potential and how easily she wrecks this military base that they brag. Oh, yeah, it was designed to hold the Hulk. So she's not getting in here. And she like rips the ceiling out of this underground bunker.
I don't want to say like, oh, I had a problem with that line, because I don't have a problem with anything in comics. It's all fake, right? But when they said that, I was like, what does that look like? What is a stronghold? That's impossible. Like there is no such thing, you know, something that can withstand the Hulk. So I thought that was kind of a funny throwaway line.
Yeah, it's like you guys have clearly not met the Hulk because he's on the run all the time because he is so strong. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first utterance of an MCU character in the X-Men universe.
Yeah, so as these episodes progress, we get more and more involvement from other characters. And it starts with little mentions like this until it goes into full blown parts of storylines are including other characters, which is pretty cool. I like that they did it that way, because when it happens, it's surprising, it's not expected, and I think, at least for me, I was like, oh, I didn't know. I was already entrenched in this world before any mention of anyone else, and so I just didn't think we were doing that.
Yeah, and in total fairness, is like they don't have to do that. I mean, the comics definitely do, where there's a ton of crossover events, like characters just pop up in different episodes. I know you and I talked about the Nightcrawler like moonlighting as a alternate Spider-Man in New York, just having fun with Peter Parker. And so like those things happen a lot in the comics. And to see, hey, okay, they mentioned the Hulk, so we know that the Hulk exists in the movies, and maybe they're connecting this universe to the movies, or at least they're willing to acknowledge that this is all taking place under one umbrella for the first time, I think, since the rights have been bought to actually produce X-Men content. And then we get, hey, Captain America is in this episode. Yes. And if he's not careful, he's about to get dog walked by Rogue.
Man. When she throws his shield, I was like, that's dirty. That's dirty, man.
Yeah, it was really like fun and petty because she just takes it from him, busts through the top of the bunker and just chucks it into the forest. And I mean, maybe it'll boomerang around back later because it seems to always do that. But
sure,
for the most part, Cap's got a long walk ahead of him.
Yes. Part of me was like, ooh, I'm kind of into the idea of Rogue just keeping this. And like, as she's going about her mission, she just has Cap's shield. Sure, why not? That's cool.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun, actually. So I'm curious to see when we get to season 2, how much other involvement from sort of like peripheral Marvel characters are going to be involved. Because some of the X-Men storylines get really big. And you got to think that with some of the events we see here in episodes 8 and 9 and going into the final episode of the season, that these are like world level events. You can't avoid running into the Avengers or something. And of course, Avengers and X-Men was a huge comic, some more beloved than others, but it was a big storyline in the comic books. And I think this is a good opportunity to do that if they really wanted to, but we'll see how that goes. But for the purposes of this episode, we're really grappling with, I think, maybe the collapse of Charles's dream here, because Beast is in the wreckage of Genosha with the reporter, and he quotes MLK, and he tells the reporter something along the lines of, hey, this is not exactly what you said, but this is what you mean, that we basically have to like beg you for acceptance.
That's great.
Yeah. Awesome. And he's like, okay, so you can leave before I like burn through any more of your tolerance. And like, it shows Beast's emotional intelligence in that moment as well, to recognize that this person who I guess is still keeping up the appearances of being an ally to mutants while really not holding that position in their heart, and choosing to quote MLK in that moment, and having the reporter push back with like, oh, well, breaking windows is not communication. And like her complete lack of understanding of like why people would riot in the face of like civil oppression. And I think it's a really important like tonal moment in the entire show, not just in this episode, but it sort of drives this wedge between the idea that there are like human mutant sympathizers that kind of like want to help, but then when faced with like actually helping, it's like, oh yeah, we don't actually really want to do that. Like we'll film the story and we'll put it on the news, and like we'll take credit for doing that, but we don't actually want to be involved in helping you because it's dangerous.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a moment that works best because we see them prior to this moment. So it's not just like, oh, a random person. And we see the good relationship that they have, perhaps leaning towards a romantic relationship that they have. She makes Beast blush.
Right. Yeah. So at the end of the last episode, the beginning of this one. Because she was at the house interviewing them.
Yeah,
when
she's at the
Scott
house,
loses
so-
his shit.
Yes. So it works better because it's not just Beast's anger towards humanity. It's Beast's anger towards one specific person who has said some really offensive things that she didn't realize were offensive. And perhaps he let slide because, in times of peace, it's easier to make peace. But in times of war, everything that you say is political and everything that you say is taken aside, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, and I find that it's an interesting moment for Beast's character because the Beast that exists now is like a ruthless kind of asshole.
Right. Yeah. You were
And-
saying that.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting character turn because all of the portrayals that we've seen of Beast, whether it be the cartoon, whether it be the movies, he's always an intellectual that seems to like prefer science over combat. And like he's the one who builds the Blackbird and he's the one who sort of is the guy in the chair for the X-Men, right?
Right.
But his name is Beast for a reason.
Right.
And when he wants to, show off how capable he is as like a field agent, he's more than happy to do so. And then when he becomes the head of X-Force, he's even more ruthless than probably, Scott when he takes over and is leading these sort of clandestine missions that he shouldn't be leading. So I feel like it could be an interesting tipping point to really see that character of Beast change in the future. And I mean, we'll have to explore that as the season 2 rolls out, but
Right.
this might be the catalyst for something like that. And, speaking of Scott, he's got just a direct holograph telephone line right to the president. And I'm like, I didn't even realize he's talking to the president until he says, Mr. President. It's like, who's this that you're talking to? Oh, it's the president of the United States. Okay. So
Yeah,
Scott's got friends in high places.
I love unnecessary advances in technology. So like, why does Scott need to be in that room to talk to a hologram when like you and I right now just have like phones and video calls? Like,
This is 97.
further
This is
leap?
pre FaceTime.
Right, but it's pre FaceTime, but post hologram time. Like we don't have that now, is what I'm saying. Like when sci-fi jumps the gun and like misses the technology that we actually have and goes like one step further, but that's another silly point.
Yeah, like
But
who doesn't love
thought
a
that was funny.
hologram? Maybe the
Sure, of
hologram is
course.
like end to end encrypted. They can't just like talk on the phone. So it's got
Sure.
private, one-way channel with the president, which turns out to be Senator Kelly, who is featured in the cartoon and is featured in the movie as well. So it's a familiar character, but we don't really like connect the dots on that until he says Mr. President. And then it's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, well, this is the guy that was an enemy of theirs who ended up becoming an ally who then became president. And even he sort of is trying to pacify Scott in the sense that you don't want somebody less tolerant than me in
Right,
this
right.
position. And not like, hey, I'm your friend, I want to help you. Like, you don't want someone who hates you more than I hate you.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting distinction.
It's a gnarly concept of like, you take this slap on the wrist from me because if you don't, someone else is gonna just straight up kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's some heavy stuff. And so I don't blame Scott's frustration. And I mean, he's obviously dealing with a lot by the time that this is happening. But I found it interesting that they sort of have a back channel to the president this entire time. And like, obviously smart on the president's part to, behind closed doors, like work on being amicable with the population of mutants that generally save the world on a daily, if not weekly basis. You definitely want to be allied with them. So throwing around threats is a interesting way to handle that politically, because it's a war that like you kind of know that you're gonna lose if you start it, but it also enables humanity to sort of like tacitly approve of what Trask and the Sentinel program wants to do.
Right.
Because they're the ones that can actually control and mitigate the threat of the X-Men.
This is, I think, where the metaphor for marginalized groups breaks down a little bit. If we look at the history of America, generally what happens is new groups of people come in waves, okay? And when they come in, generally, they are working hard to establish themselves in the country and to make money, save money, start businesses. And then they become accepted. And then another wave of people comes in, and we, I shouldn't say we hate them, because we don't, but in the history of the States, that's usually what happens, right? At one point, Italians were the worst people that could be around, and Irish people were the worst people that could be around. And now the Italians and the Irish are hating on whoever is coming in after them, right? And it's a sad fact of humanity that we forget where we came from, and we think that all of the pain that we've experienced, it doesn't cause us to be empathetic to other people. It causes us to feel like we've paid our dues, and so you have to go through the same thing. So with the X-Men, just imagine, this new people group starts popping up all across the country, but they're not working their way up. They're literally like gods over normal humanity. And not only that, they're not asking for anything other than to like, hey, let us just do our thing. That's it. Like, we don't need help. We're not asking for assistance. We're not asking for, our own state in the United, give us like Mississippi and we'll be okay. It's just like, leave us alone. Let us fight aliens and interdimensional beings, the devil sometimes.
Yep.
And people are still treating them like, what we call second-class citizens. So I think the metaphor breaks down a little bit there, because what, burden, quote unquote, could non-mutated people claim that the X-Men are on society, other than the risk? They're scary, but for the most part, they're helping. They're saving the world every week in and week out.
And we got just angry folks like, they took our jobs.
We
were the heroes. We used to save the planet, but now the X-Men do that, and we just have to go back to our shitty 9 to 5 and hope that our 401k doesn't get poorly invested, and
so it's still the
struggle to pay our mortgages.
Yeah, it's still the replacement fear, that fear that like, oh, well, we'll be obsolete, but it's like, well, in the face of like Apocalypse and Galactus, yes, you are obsolete. So, let them do their thing.
And I think it's an interesting look at sort of existential philosophy in that, like, on the galactic scale of the villains that we face, the Thanoses who can snap out half the universe, the Galactuses who eat planets, like all these interdimensional beings, the Celestials, these god-like creatures. Humanity is very small on that scale, but in the grand scheme of everything, like, all of this is very small on the scale, So I think it's a good way to sort of look at the idea that, like, we're small, like, we're just carbon-based life forms living on this little rock in a giant universe. We are very small, so we're like kind of insignificant in that way, but there's a lot of things in place within human nature that are sort of designed to push back against that, to tell us how important we are, to tell us how much we matter, not just to our own individual lives, but to like history. And then, human history, is a speck of dust on the cosmic timeline.
Yeah,
so I think there are like really interesting large existential themes here that they don't really spend a ton of time going into just yet, but I will be curious to see if that begins to lay the foundation for sort of humanity's place in the rest of this story, because it doesn't seem like humans have the same kind of issues with like a Thor or a Captain America. Right. It's like, these guys are also superpowered beings that sort of make you obsolete. But because Captain America is a super soldier, Thor is an Asgardian, you just kind of like, okay, That's fine. I can accept those guys, but muties, nah, not them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I wonder if there are any Thor storylines where they're protesting Thor, as an off-planet alien.
That would be interesting to see. And I'm curious if, like, because of the way that the X-Men functions, if this is coming from a place of basic human jealousy, in that Magneto won the genetic lottery and that he's got these superpowers and he doesn't have to work a job. He can just rip a asteroid out of the ocean and turn it into his house and then recruit a bunch of people to go live with him, and everybody follows him, and he's charismatic and he's got great hair. So I'm curious if, like, that's part of the culture of the anti-mutant sentiment, is that it's like all these people won the genetic lottery to some degree, even the ones that are cursed by their power. I think a lot of human beings that exist in the X-Men universe that don't like mutants, given the opportunity, might roll the dice on that X gene, because all we see is them trying to, like, get superpowers to then fight the X-Men. Wouldn't I? Well, if it's like, hey, you might just wake up one day and if you open your eyes, you're gonna, like, you can blow the ceiling off of your condo. Like, I don't have ruby quartz glasses lying around to just toss on at a moment's notice.
Like, if they could pinpoint, what the mutation is, right? And so it's dormant in some, active in others. And, Forge makes a little booth that you go in and they turn it on. And if you have that, you'll be activated. And so they just put everyone through it. I would do it. 100% I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think once there's more mutants in the world and you start to see, like, the ones that are just like a skeleton covered in jelly, like, I don't want that existence. I don't want to be the guy that's just like water all the time. If it's like, hey, I get to be, mostly human passing, and so I get to still, like, enjoy the benefits of being a bipedal human being, but I also have superpowers, then yeah, that's a great deal. But if it's like my skin's going to turn inside out and as a bonus I can alter reality, it's like, maybe I'll just
I would do that
eat my normal.
Oh man, yeah.
Well, speaking of mutations that get activated, we see White Queen activate her diamond mode. So, like, the notion that mutants are still evolving is brought to the table. And Emma is a very, very good character. Not in this show per se, but I think we've seen a little, like, hint of her here and there, like the little snarkiness she gave Madeline at the table at the council meeting. But she, in the current series of X books, is one of the foremost characters, and she runs the Hellfire Club. She's very politically savvy. Obviously, she is a telepath, so she's got some advantages there, but she's very ambitious. She's very cunning, very intelligent, and she's a fantastic character. And I just started thinking, like, if they were to do, like, a Hellfire Club spin-off show, that would be a lot of fun, because you wouldn't have to have all of the other X-Men. You could just exist within the world of, like, her and Sebastian Shaw, and, like, her kids get involved eventually. Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat is one of the members of that eventually as well. I think Azazel is in the movie. So you get this, like, group of villains, but really they're very business oriented. And in that way, I think it makes them interesting. Like, imagine, like, Succession, but they're all super powered, right? Then it's going to be a very crazy kind of show, and then you can fold in other X-Men characters here and there. And I don't know if I'd want to see a ton of that, but the X books that were written about the Hellfire Club, at least this most recent run, were very well articulated stories about the manipulation of resources, politics, sort of inner fighting between the parties that are all sort of positioning themselves for power within the Hellfire Club. So kind of like Game of Thrones meets Succession, and sprinkle in some superpowers. And I think there's a backbone there for something interesting. And I'm really curious to see, with the success of this show, how far they want to push the available content. Because there is X-Force and X-Factor and Excalibur and X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, Hellfire Club. Like, there's so many different sort of New Mutants, another one. So there's so many different factions you can pull from here and have very interesting stories for each of those groups. And if you get the right creative people in place, I think like the possibilities are pretty much endless, which is why there were so many books in this series. It's like Wolverine, 40 books deep, X-Force, 40 books deep. X-Men went into X-Men Red, X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, Dead X-Men, and then like on and on and on until there's so much you can't really like keep up with it. And I think you run the risk of oversaturation at that point. But if the content is as good as this, I wouldn't mind exploring more of it.
Yeah, especially, and this is just me talking, in cartoon form.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's that's actually what I want from it, is because I think you really can tell some great stories. And people are fans of anime for the way it communicates, I think, some more adult stuff and violence in a way that a lot of cartoons sort of stray from. And I don't think it has to go that far, but I think the potential is there for it to be very rich territory. And we are introduced finally, I think, to the first time we see Bastion in the full in this one.
Hey, the flying purple people eater.
Decides to put that record on specifically for us to know.
It's pretty interesting. We get everything that happens with the Godzilla Sentinel, and we're still kind of in the dark as to like what's happening and who's behind all of this. And it's not until Rogue goes rogue and she's like, well, I'm done. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And so she goes to find Gyrick.
Yep.
Yeah. And simultaneously Trask invites them to the UN and tells them about the secret the secret diet soda door.
Because of course it's the vending machine's never out of Diet Coke,
which just like feels too simple to be hiding this insane human experimentation project behind one button.
I would have accidentally accessed that lab many times.
If any child has walked past that machine, they have pressed every button and opened the door. Yeah. You need to have order diet, then soda, then diet 2 more times. Something, whatever,
Or that diet soda is like $100, so no one's going to accidentally just buy it at the vending machine.
Yeah. And so the pieces start to come together because we've known the name Bolivar Trask, obviously, and Gyrick and all of these different players, but we didn't know is that there's one person that's kind of behind all of them who's been in the shadows. And it's Bastion. And it's pretty interesting. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of him. I'm a fan of this whole thing that happens with Trask, which we don't realize is kind of widespread, which is another question that I have for you. But when Rogue lets Trask go, first of all, I'm like, yes, Rogue, yes, absolutely, I agree with this decision 100%.
Execute him.
Go for it. But then he returns as this zombie
Sentinel.
Flying, and
very scary.
pretty cool. Sinister also kind of comes back, which makes the whole episode with him feel less side questy, and things start to finally come together.
He's always in the background doing something. He's doing some shady stuff always. That's just what he wants.
Sinister.
I think he says, I don't know if it's this episode or the one after this, but he's like, my dream is like a pen full of mutants for me to experiment on. It's like, you're a sick man.
Yeah.
No wonder you're working with Bastion here.
Do you know the Simpsons quote from Milhouse? Alf is back in Pog form.
Yes.
I wrote that in my notes. Bolivar is back in Sentinel form.
He is, and he's like a legitimate threat, right? I think it detonates the first floor of not the first floor, but whatever floor that they're on at the time. And we see that, oh wow, like he's found a way to incorporate Sentinel tech into people, and even one of them is dangerous at that point, and we don't know exactly the details beyond that. But when Sinister's involved, there's always some genetic manipulation going on, so it makes sense that him and Bastion are working together. But I love that Bastion sort of just like gives Sinister a hard time, because it's like he's like, my plan is bigger and better than yours, I just kind of like need your help, so go back to doing your like weird creepy mutation experiments. But I think my favorite part of the episode is that when we're introduced to Bastion in full at the end, he's like, it's time to shave Magneto. And I'm like, whoa, this is an interesting choice, my friend. He's tied to a chair and you're just like sharpening this straight razor, and you're going to dry shave him after you gave him a heated towel, though. So it was like, he's being kind of nice. He doesn't want to cut him. Yeah, exactly.
He talks about being pliable and how the heat causes you. Yeah,
it's a nice little double entendre. But we we end the episode with Magneto about to get shaved, which is an interesting choice when you move into episode 8, and then we see Magneto maybe got his whole body shaved by Bastion.
It's a little hard to say. There is very quickly before we move on, I loved the brief scene between Kurt and Rogue in Mexico, where they talk about being adopted siblings, and also when Trask is just like wiping the floor with them, and he says, how does it feel to be abandoned by the future? And then Cable shows up, and yeah, but it's good. It's a good introduction to Bastion. It kind of, like I said, it pulls all these like strings together into one knot. We also get the news breaking that, claiming, well, the X-Men have been lying about Professor X dying, by the way. And this really confused me. At first, I was like, wait, did they not know that he was dead, or was it all pretend, or what? So I'm still not 100% sure.
Okay, so good thing I did my homework and watched that end of the previous series. And I think the X-Men were confident enough to be like, he's not coming back, but he was technically like on life support when the Shi'ar took him at the end of the original cartoon series in 96. So they never like had a funeral in the way that they mourned Gambit. Like they never confirmed that, oh, he's dead, but they also never heard from the Shi'ar that like, oh, hey, like he's awake and he's about to marry Lalandra. Like he never communicated that.
Well, I think we've all had family in hospitals before, and we know that they're not always the greatest, Oh, we didn't tell you. They died 2 days ago. And we're like, oh, I should have checked in with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's not this like elaborate deception being pulled off by the X-Men. It's not like, oh my God, we're engaging in this media campaign to tell everybody that Professor X is dead and that we're going to move forward sort of towing the party line that way. It was Professor X was assaulted in public on television and assumed dead by the world, and the X-Men didn't bother to correct them with like the technicalities. They're like, well, for all intents and purposes, he's not here. So if you think he's dead, then we can't really say that he's going to come back. So we're just going to operate under the premise that he is not returning. And so weird to frame it as though like the X-Men have been lying about this thing the whole time when it's like they didn't know. So
Well, later on, Jubilee, she's talking to Roberto and she's like, hey, we were just trying to keep the professor safe. Let's go shopping.
You got a trust fund and I have great taste.
Yes. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think also Sunspot's mom, we find out that she has no loyalty to her own blood. And as soon as she finds out that he's a mutant, she's like, yeah, cuff him, take them both away, get them out of my fundraiser, because she is also an example of I need to keep up appearances that I'm a mutant sympathizer. I'm raising funds for Genosha. But when it comes down to my son is a mutant, yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah. Well, it's like trusting, that comes later, obviously. But when the whole world is being chased down by these human sentinels, and it looks like they're just being killed and killed and killed, when we get to Roberto's mother's fundraiser, they're like, oh, we're not here to kill them. We're here to save them. We're actually here to help. And so Roberto's mother does the whole thing of like, just trust the people who say that they're trying to help you. Go with them. Like, this is good. It's not like she's like, yeah, burn him at the stake. You know, like she buys into this thing, which, you know, it's a fine line again throughout human history of like, these are the good guys. These are the guys who are here to protect you and to save you, until they aren't, until they're the people who are there to oppress you. And like, knowing that fine line can be quite difficult at times in human history.
Yeah, that is true. But like, I mean, you're a parent. If a couple of dudes just flew into your living room with like no discernible real eyes, they've got purple cybernetic veins shooting up their neck, their hand transforms into a cannon, and their feet are like rockets. It's a hard sell to be like, hey, we're the good guys. You guys look pretty evil.
Sure. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, all I would say to that is, you know, look at our government in all of its forms.
Yeah.
And if we really look at a lot of things, it's like, you know, there's that classic skit. Are we the baddies? When the Nazis are like, why do our hats have skulls on them? Like, oh, are we the baddies? So yeah, it's like I said, it's an interesting twist to the story that they don't just come in blasting and like blowing everything up. They're like, no, actually, we're here to save the mutants. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and we do get an explanation from Cable, as he is now part of this, and that he's trying to explain like what happened with Bastion in the future, and that like he wins, but also like does good for humanity by policing the mutants to be slaves, to better the world for humans. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so it's basically, you know, the idea in the story is planted that Bastion, had it not been for his mother not being able to accept that he's not normal, and had he gone with Professor X, that he would have been like a good guy. Since he went the other route, his vision of harmony between humans and mutants is to subjugate the mutants, not the human. So he's the opposite of Magneto, basically. Yeah, he's just like, no, actually, it'd be better if they broke rocks on a conveyor belt all day for us, and then humans are free to pursue, you know, the greatness of our culture, and that's what happens. I love that they talk about Nimrod, the, you know, crazy sentinel from the future, like reaching back into the past and communicating with Bastion, kind of a thing, and like this voice inside of his head that's like propelling him towards this like destiny, and it's very interesting. Like I like this character. I like this guy a lot. I'm not quite sure about the white goatee and pink skin look, but I'll get over it.
Thank you for checking out the show and becoming an X-Friend. Hopefully you'll join us on our journey through X-Men 97 and beyond. X-Friends is a Movie Friends and Bad Movies We Love co-production and part of the Scheist Podcast Network, hosted by Seth Vargas and Nick Scheist. You can find our contact info and socials in the show notes, and you can email the show directly at xfriends@thescheist.com. That's the letter X, friends@thescheist.com. So until next time, Remy LeBeau would be the first to tell you that life, like cards, is wild.